Good morning. This is the Unitarian Universalist 2025 General Assembly. My name is Dennis Neyman. I'm the Kentucky coordinator for the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation. Today's talk will be on alternatives to war. The theme for the General Assembly this year is Meet the Moment. I hope this will be a chance to realign our values and our activities in a way that will bring about the beloved community and an improved society. I'd like to start with a little bit of context for this presentation. Federal agencies have been facing crippling cuts, especially in programs that have a humanitarian focus. There's been a proposed $1 trillion budget for the Pentagon. This is the highest level of defense spending since World War II. In the words of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, this is completely unnecessary. Almost the only beneficiaries are going to be weapons manufacturers. And for consumers like us in the UU fold, we're most concerned with the effect of this kind of military buildup on the environment. The US Department of Defense is the world's single largest consumer of oil, and as a result, one of the world's top greenhouse emitters. The Cost of War Project is one of the U.S. Peace Memorial Prize winners from 2022. Their research indicates that thousands of U.S. service members have died in combat and have thousands of civilian contractors as well. Many have died later on from injuries and illnesses sustained in the war zones. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and contractors have been wounded and are living with disabilities and war-related illnesses. Allied security forces have also suffered significant casualties, as have opposition forces. So today, I'd like to focus on explaining and giving details about the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation, Alternatives to War. This foundation honors Americans who speak out against war and work for peaceful solutions between nations. We need, by the way, more Unitarian Universalist founding members. We need more of you to join us in this program for seeking alternatives to war. The Cost of War Project shows that far more people killed in recent wars have been civilians. More than 432,000 civilians have been killed in the fighting since 2001. Millions of people living in war zones have also been displaced by war. The post-9/11 wars have forcibly displaced at least 38 million people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, the Philippines, Libya, and Syria, and Gaza. This number exceeds the total displaced by every war since 1900, except World War II. The U.S. could have pursued several non-military alternatives to holding accountable those that were responsible for perpetrating the 9/11 attacks. I encourage you to look at the Cost of War Project for details. The Brown University Cost of War Project has a beyond war paradigm of alternatives that also will be fruitful reading. They conclude that there are far more significant threats than war and terrorism, including those posed by climate change and healthcare insecurity. Role models are needed for historical and theoretical alternatives to the war paradigm. And I might add that the U.S. Peace Memorial Project has one of its central roles is to develop role models for alternatives to war. Now, I'd like to turn to the connection between the UU values, which are aligned with the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation. I'm going to read a description for those that might have some vision challenges of the UU's latest depiction of values. This image that you're about to see is of a chalice with an overlay of the word love over the flame, with 6 outstretched arms that create a circle around each of the core values and form a 6-petal flower shape. Each arm is a different color, and clockwise they are interdependence, orange, equity, red, transformation, purple, pluralism, blue, generosity, green, and justice, yellow. You can see in this depiction a beautiful flower shape that highlights our UU values that are based on previous renditions of our values. And certainly hope that you'll refer to those as you develop your understanding of this connection. Let's get to the subject. The U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation, Alternatives to War, honors Americans who speak out against war and work for peace. We publish a U.S. Peace Registry, award the annual U.S. Peace Prize, and raise funds to build the U.S. Peace Memorial. Later on, you'll see a video with Dr. Knox giving details about these 3 elements. Our primary goal is building a culture of peace. Let me give you a little bit of background about my own family. My inspiration is my father and mother. My father was a U.S. Marine in World War II who served on Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. He came home convinced that there needed to be, or there were, alternatives to war. My twin brother and I were raised thinking of options. It's interesting, though, as twin brothers, I took the path of being a pacifist and was a CO during the Vietnam era, while my brother was in the Army Reserve, and luckily he never saw combat. So my father is a founding member of the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation and has lived a life of being a peace and social justice activist. One of the highlights I remember of his life was going to New York and meeting Eleanor Roosevelt in the 1950s, along with UU friends from Tampa, Florida, where they expressed concern about nuclear weapons. It's kind of an anecdote that at the conclusion of the meeting, the members said, well, thank you, Mrs. Roosevelt, for your support for seeking some actions against about nuclear weapons. And she said something to the effect of, well, sweetie, it's a long road ahead of us. It's a difficult struggle, but it was one small step for some UU friends. My story in brief, I was influenced by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. after meeting him in Montgomery, Alabama at age 11. My father took my brother and I to the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church to hear Dr. King, and I shook his hand afterwards. It was a pivotal moment in my life as an activist. I was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War based on UU and Society of Friends teachings, and I served 2 years of national service as a CO. Currently, I would describe myself as a social justice activist, and I'm a community outreach director for the Salam Peace Network. The peace symbol is one of our guiding lights in this foundation. Later on, you'll see a short story about our birthday of the U.S. peace symbol. Certainly, our goal is to end U.S. war and militarism and honor those who work for peace. You'll see Costs of War website later on, and also a depiction of the 2024 prize winner, the Friends Committee on National Legislation.
I'm pleased to announce that the 2024 U.S. Peace Prize is awarded to the Friends Committee on National Legislation for efforts over 81 years to educate, build coalitions, and influence Congress to stop funding war and nuclear weapons.
Thinking about us this week and how we have been going through all the mixed emotions of the world we face and wondering, does our work make any difference? Can we keep going? So I really want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts and on behalf of all the General Committee, all the staff, thousands of advocates around the country who work with us. This means a lot to us right now.
The United States has a long history of waging war, from the Native American nations decimated by the U.S. Army to recent bombings of tribal areas in Pakistan and neighborhoods in Libya and Yemen. Since the end of World War II, no other country has killed more people living outside of its borders. Most Americans remain silent while we slaughter children, mothers, and grandparents. In my lifetime, the U.S. has killed well over 2 million people. We have wounded 10 times that many and have caused immeasurable pain to innocent families around the world. We prioritize funding for war over spending on education, health care, a balanced budget, and everything else that can have a positive impact on quality of life. This is my thesis, that one reason the U.S. wages so many wars is because few Americans speak out against them. Can you imagine what an impact it could have if 1% of the population came to the next anti-war rally? Most people consider those who fought for civil rights to be heroes. What if those who demand peace were also appreciated? What if 1% of voters contacted the representatives in Congress asking for an end to a particular war? That would have an impact. The U.S. honors its military and reinforces warrior behavior with monuments to wartime presidents, memorials to war and to those who have served and died in wars, and with medals, promotions, and ceremonies. Many Americans believe that you earn the peace by winning a war. Most peace memorials in the United States are actually war memorials. And all of these activities and symbols are all part of sustaining a culture of war. There are few indications that American society values those who oppose war. This has resulted in a country that recognizes contributions of the soldier, but often holds in derision those who call for peaceful alternatives. What if we honored anti-war activity? What if we referred to these participants as heroes and patriots? What if we stopped referring to the word anti-war as negative? The word anti-war is no more negative than antibiotic or antihistamine, or antifungal or anti-diarrheal. War is a disease. What are the potential consequences of peacefully opposing war in this country? Arrest, tear gas, beatings by the police, imprisonment, or worse, home invasions, attorney fees, fines, loss of income, maybe a loss of friends, maybe family members who no longer speak to you. You might lose your job or a promotional opportunity. I suspect that many of you in this room have suffered physically, financially, and or emotionally for your anti-war convictions. It is often heroic to speak out against war. Since the end of World War II, the U.S. has invaded more than 20 countries. If you add Pakistan to this list, it's actually 24 that the U.S. government would admit to having bombed. U.S. presidents reinforced the culture of war. They refer to everyone in the military as heroes and do what they can to suppress dissent. War is part of our culture, and change requires that people be taught, or that peace be taught, and that peace leadership be valued, documented, recognized, and honored. I'm going to tell you about our project. It's time to dedicate a national monument to peace and to the peacemakers, and to take steps towards creating a culture of peace in the United States. The foundation exists to demonstrate that advocating for peaceful solutions to international problems is an honorable and socially acceptable activity. That's the small cultural change we're trying to make. The goals are to recognize U.S. peace leadership as a reminder that America values peace, to build the U.S. Peace Memorial as a national monument in Washington, D.C., and to publish the U.S. Peace Registry, which identifies role models for peace and anti-war activity. There are currently no national records of U.S. peace leadership. Our children are not taught about the peace movement and its leaders. In terms of recognizing peace leadership, we award an annual Peace Prize. Cindy Sheehan won the 2009 prize in recognition of her extraordinary and innovative anti-war activism. Congressman Dennis Kucinich in recognition of his national leadership to prevent and end wars. This project will provide information that can be used to educate American youth and others about our nation's rich history of patriotic citizens and leaders who have advocated for peace and against war. It will recognize famous people as well as people like you. One way we recognize peace leadership is by selecting quotations from famous Americans that will be engraved on the memorial's walls. We hope that everyone will recognize each of the names but be shocked by the strong anti-war sentiment. That will be the teaching moment that can help to change our culture. Visitors will learn that American leaders from all walks of life have opposed one or more wars. In terms of quotations that will be on the monument, here's one from Helen Keller, not known for her anti-war work. Strike against war, for without you no battles can be fought. Albert Einstein, it is my conviction that killing under the cloak of war is nothing but an act of murder. This is what we mean by the person will know the name but be surprised by the strong anti-war content. You're familiar with President Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex and his concerns about the futility, stupidity, and brutality of war. We have quotations going back to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Here's one from Benjamin Franklin. So our national monument will serve as an educational venue. Its very existence will make it clear that it's acceptable to oppose U.S. wars, that those who speak out for peace are not traitors, un-American, unpatriotic, or anti-military. And finally, I've told you about the Peace Award, I've told you about the monument. Our final goal is that we're publishing the U.S. Peace Registry. Our foundation is developing a national database that documents the broad range of modern peace and activism and anti-war behavior. It recognizes individual and organizational role models for U.S. peace leadership. U.S. Peace Registry currently exists online and will be published as a book next year. It is hypothesized that documenting, recognizing, and honoring role models for activism will adjust our culture, inspiring more Americans to speak out for peace. So our work will help current and future generations understand how individuals and organizations have opposed war and promoted peace. We hope that it will stimulate new discussion, increase comfort levels, and lead to greater citizen involvement. This Kennedy quote could have been the impetus for our project. War will exist until that distant day when the conscientious objector enjoys the same reputation and prestige that the warrior does today.
This is a picture of myself, Dennis Neyman, and Dr. Michael Knox. We met in Tampa, Florida, and we discussed plans to increase the foundation membership and develop publicity, even more publicity about our mission, thus my presence here. I'd like to invite you to, when you get to the website, to look at the volunteer activities that are possible and let us know if you'd like to become involved.